The photo appeared in the family group chat on a Saturday afternoon while I was making lunch. Emma's 8th birthday party. My parents' house. The good tablecloth, the balloons, the birthday cake my mother made from scratch every year for whoever was turning 8. My sister Laura's family was there. Her husband Mark, their son Jake, who is 10, and Emma, the birthday girl, in a purple dress with a crown. My parents were there, smiling the way they smile in photos. My children were not there. Sophie is 7. Henry is 4. They are Emma's cousins. They are my parents' grandchildren. They were not in the photo. They had not been at the party. I had found out about the party 2 days before it happened, with a text that said, "Emma's birthday Saturday, if you can make it," with a smiley face that made the whole thing feel casual, informal, like a last-minute idea that had just come together. It had not just come together. I know this because of what I found when I started looking. Before I tell you what I found, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you are right now. Now let me take you back 4 years, to when Sophie was 3 and drew a picture of our whole family and put it on my refrigerator, and I told her it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. My name is Dana. I'm 35 years old. I have 2 children, Sophie, who is 7, and will tell you she is almost 8 if you ask, and Henry, who is 4 and is currently interested in tractors and in wearing the same red sweater every day. I have a husband named Mike, who travels for work more than either of us would choose, in a house 40 minutes from my parents that is always, in some configuration, slightly too loud and slightly too messy and entirely mine. I also have a sister named Laura. Laura is 2 years older than me. She married young, has 2 children who are older than mine, and has lived in the same town as my parents since she graduated college. 10 minutes from their house. Close enough to drop by on a Tuesday with no particular reason. I want to tell you about Laura carefully, because what happened is not a story where she is the villain. She's my sister. She did not design the situation. She was simply the one who was present, and presence, over years, becomes preference, and preference becomes pattern, and pattern becomes what looks like normal until you photograph it. My parents, Thomas and Patricia, Thomas who coached Little League for 20 years, and Patricia, who bakes from scratch for every birthday and significant occasion, are good people. That's not something I say to soften what comes later. They are genuinely kind, genuinely present in the ways that count. My father taught me to drive. My mother sat with me through 3 days of labor when Mike's flight was delayed. They are real. But they have a particular kind of blindness that good people sometimes have toward the shape of their own habits. And the habit, when I finally photographed it, was this: Laura's family was at things first. Always. My grandmother, Thomas's mother, a woman named Edna who died 5 years ago at 91, never operated this way. She had 4 grandchildren from 2 families, and she maintained, with the precision of a woman who had survived enough difficulty to know what actually mattered, perfect equity. Same birthday money, same phone calls, same time at the table. She would drive 40 minutes in winter to be at a school play if she'd driven 40 minutes in summer for the other family. She noticed, I think, the tendency in her own son. She'd said to me once when I was maybe 20 and Laura had just gotten engaged, "Just make sure you speak up when you need to, Dana. People forget to look over their shoulders if no one reminds them." I hadn't fully understood what she meant. Looking back now, she knew exactly what she was warning me about. The signs were there before the children. Small things. When Mike and I bought our house, my parents helped Laura and Mark with their down payment 3 years earlier. We didn't ask for the same, but we noticed when we weren't offered. When my pregnancy with Sophie overlapped with Laura's with Jake, my mother spent more evenings at Laura's house. She lives closer. She needs more, my mother said. That was true. And also, it was a pattern. When Sophie was born, my parents came to the hospital. They stayed 3 hours. When Jake was born 2 years later, they stayed a week. I filed it away. The way you file things when you love people and don't want to make those things into more than they are. Sophie started drawing pictures of our family when she was 3. Crayon drawings, the kind with disproportionate heads and floating arms that children produce with absolute confidence in their accuracy. She drew everyone. Me, Mike, Henry as a circle, with a face. Grandma. Grandpa, Laura, Mark, Emma, Jake. Everyone together in one picture. She put it on the refrigerator herself, proud of it. I looked at that drawing every morning for 2 years. I thought it represented something that was real. I should have looked more carefully at the gaps. The Saturday the photo appeared, I read the message 3 times. The good tablecloth, the homemade cake, my parents' dining room, Emma in her purple dress and crown. I set my phone face down on the counter. I had received a text 2 days before saying, "Emma's birthday Saturday, if you can make it," with a smiley face. If you can make it. Not, "We're having a birthday party, please come." If you can make it, like it was an incidental thing. Like it had come together spontaneously at the last minute. Sophie had asked me once whether she would get a birthday party at Grandma and Grandpa's house. I had said, "Of course, sweetheart." I picked up my phone. I opened the photo again. I started counting the occasions I could remember in the past 2 years where my children had been given 2 days' notice. I counted to 6 before I needed to write them down. I went to get a piece of paper. I want to tell you what I found over the following 2 weeks, because the picture that assembled itself was one I hadn't been looking at clearly enough to see. I started with the obvious. I went through the family group chat. Every message going back 3 years. I searched for mentions of Emma and Jake's birthdays, school plays, Christmas Eve, Easter, the annual summer barbecue at my parents' house. For Emma's 7th birthday, the year before, I found a message sent to the group 18 days before the party. Emma's birthday next month. Mark it in your calendars. We're thinking the 14th. For my parents' anniversary dinner last spring, a message 22 days in advance. Anniversary dinner, hoping to have everyone together. For Jake's 10th birthday, 3 weeks' notice. For Sophie's 7th birthday, my daughter's birthday. My parents had sent a card. They had called. They had not offered to host a party at their house. I had hosted it myself. 20 children in our garden. My mother came for 2 hours. My father came for 40 minutes because he had something else that afternoon. I wrote the dates on paper, side by side. 1 column for Laura's family. 1 column for mine. The pattern was not subtle when I saw it written down. It had been invisible only because I had experienced each event separately, in the moment, and accepted the small explanations that came with each one. Scheduling conflict, short notice, too far a drive. The children are a little young for this kind of thing. Separately, each explanation had seemed reasonable. Together, across 3 years, they made something that looked very different from coincidence. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part came from a conversation I had with my friend Caroline. Caroline has known me for 11 years. She is the kind of friend who remembers what you said 6 months ago and brings it up when it becomes relevant. She is also the kind of friend who does not let you be a revisionist about your own life. I called her on a Wednesday evening and told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dana, do you remember about 2 years ago? You told me about Christmas Eve, that you'd found out about the timing from Laura." I said, "Yes." She said, "You mentioned that your parents had mentioned the plan to Laura before they told you. You thought it was because they were checking with her first on the date. Do you still have that text thread?" I went to find it. The text thread from 2 years ago, my mother texting me on November 22nd. "Dana, Christmas Eve at our place. Hope you and Mike can make it." That same thread, if I scrolled up, my mother had texted me, "Just wanted to give you a heads up before we finalize. We're thinking Christmas Eve. Is that okay for you on October 30th? Laura had known in October. I had known in November. I hadn't connected those 2 messages at the time. Now I did. I called Caroline back. I said, she confirmed with Laura first. She tells Laura first and then tells me after it's settled. Caroline was quiet again. Then she said, "How long do you think this has been happening?" I said, "I don't know yet. I didn't know yet. I thought that was the end of it." It wasn't. I found the text thread from Emma's 8th birthday planning, messages from my mother's phone visible in a screenshot Laura had accidentally shared in a different family chat, a smaller group of just Laura, Mark, and my parents that I was not in, but Laura had forwarded one message to the main group and hadn't realized it showed the thread above. The message from my mother to Laura about Emma's party had been sent 6 weeks before the party. 6 weeks. I had received my text 2 days before. I sat at my kitchen table with the screenshot on my phone and the list of dates on my paper and Sophie's crayon drawing of the whole family visible from where I was sitting on the refrigerator. I had been telling myself for years that the exclusions were accidental, that my parents didn't realize the pattern, that if I showed them clearly, they would be sorry and things would change, that 6 weeks versus 2 days is not accidental. 6 weeks is a plan. 2 days is a concession. I stared at the refrigerator, at Sophie's picture. Everyone together. Grandma, Grandpa, Laura, Mark, Emma, Jake, Sophie, Henry. One picture. And then I thought about something Sophie had asked me 3 weeks earlier, the week after I'd said she'd get her birthday party at Grandma and Grandpa's house. She'd asked why Emma's birthday was at Grandma's house, but her birthday wasn't. I had said, "It'll happen, sweetheart." I had believed that. I sat at the kitchen table and thought about what it would take to make it true. I did not call my mother. Not that night. Not the following day. Caroline had advised me, practically, and with the directness that is why I love her, to take 2 weeks before I did anything. To build the full picture. to know exactly what I was going to say before I said it, so that the conversation couldn't be redirected. She said, "The moment you accuse them of something they can reframe as unintentional, the conversation becomes about their feelings. You need the evidence to be so clear that feelings don't have room." She was right. I spent those 2 weeks building a document. Not for legal purposes, this wasn't a legal matter, but for my own clarity and for the conversation I was going to have. I made a simple table. 4 columns, event, when Laura was notified. When I was notified. 6 Hej 5th. Emma's 8th birthday. Laura 6 weeks. Dana 2 days. Gap 40 days. Christmas Eve 2 years ago. Laura 8 weeks. Dana 3 weeks. Gap 35 days. Jake's 10th birthday party. Laura 3 weeks. Dana 2 days. Gap 19 days. The summer barbecue last July. Laura 1 month. Dana 4 days. Gap 26 days. Sophie's birthday. No offer of a family party at grandparents' house, despite both cousins having had them. Gap infinite. Henry's birthday. Same. I printed the table. 1 page. Clean. No annotations. Just the facts in 4 columns. Then I gathered the photographs. I did it carefully the way my grandmother Edna would have done it, not dramatically. Not as a weapon. As documentation. As proof that something was happening that nobody had made visible. Screenshot of the family photo from Emma's birthday. Screenshot of the family photo from Jake's birthday. Screenshot of the family photo from the Christmas we'd been invited to last minute and hadn't attended because Mike was traveling and I couldn't manage 2 small children on a 4-hour round trip alone. That Christmas. A family photo with a space where Sophie and Henry would have been. 3 family photos. All showing Laura's family. None showing mine. I put them in order in a folder on my phone. During those 2 weeks, my mother called twice. The first time, just to check in, she mentioned the birthday party. Said it had been lovely. Said Emma had been so happy with the purple dress. Said, "We missed you. Wish you could have made it." I said, "We would have loved to be there." I said nothing else. The second time, she mentioned she was thinking about doing a big family gathering in the spring. Said she wanted everyone together. Said, "I'll send you dates soon." I said, "I'd appreciate as much notice as possible. We need to plan around Mike's travel schedule." She said, "Of course, sweetheart. I'll make sure you have plenty of time." She meant it. In that moment, she genuinely meant it. What she didn't mean was that she'd apply it consistently, because she had said some version of that thing before. And the next time a date needed confirming, she would check with Laura first, and by the time she called me, the thing would already be settled. She wasn't lying. She was just operating on a preference she hadn't examined. Have you ever had to watch someone do something wrong without knowing they were doing it and had to decide whether to say something that would change how they saw themselves? That question, whether to speak, is one of the hardest ones I've ever held. If you know it, drop a fire in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment, because what happened when I finally spoke is not what I expected. My mother called on a Thursday 2.5 weeks after the birthday photo. She was calling about spring plans. She'd been talking to Laura. They'd settled on a date. She said, "We're thinking the second weekend of April. Family dinner, probably a Saturday." "Does that work?" I said. "Can I ask when you talked to Laura about it?" She said, "Oh, a few weeks ago. We just wanted to make sure it worked with Mark's schedule." I said, "When did you decide you were planning something for April?" She said, "I don't know, maybe a month ago." "Why?" I said, "I'd like to talk about something, Mom. Not right now. Can we get together soon? Just you and Dad and me." A pause. She said, "Of course. Is everything okay?" I said, "I'd like to have a conversation." I could hear her recalibrating. The specific sound a parent makes when they recognize the register of a conversation they didn't expect. She said, "I'll talk to your father. Can we come to you on Saturday?" I said, "That would be good." She said, "Dana, is this about the birthday party?" I said, "It's about a pattern I've noticed. I'll explain when we're together." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay." Saturday was 4 days away. On Thursday night, I found one more thing. In the family group chat from 18 months earlier, my sister had posted a photo from a dinner at my parents' house. A Thursday dinner. Casual, just family. I had not been invited to that dinner. In the comments below the photo, in the family chat that I was a member of, my aunt had said, Looks like a wonderful evening. And my mother had responded with a heart emoji. I had been a member of the group when that exchange happened. I had not been invited. I had not said anything then, had not even fully registered it, just quietly scrolled past the photo and filed it somewhere I didn't look. I added it to the folder. Friday night, Sophie came to find me in the kitchen. She was holding the crayon drawing she'd made when she was 3. She'd taken it off the fridge herself. She said, "Mama, can we add someone?" I said, "Who?" she said. "I want to add Henry's friend from school. He told me today he doesn't have grandparents, and I thought maybe we could put him in our family picture." I looked at my 7-year-old. She had drawn a picture that included everyone she loved. And her first instinct, when she thought about someone who was missing, was to add them rather than leave them out. I held her face in both hands for a moment. I said, "Yes, sweetheart, we'll add him." She went to get her crayons. I went back to the folder on my phone. 4 days. Friday night. Late. Mike was traveling. Both children asleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the printed document, the folder of screenshots, and a cup of tea I'd forgotten to drink. I had been sitting there for 40 minutes. The house was the specific quiet of a house with sleeping children, not truly silent, because children in sleep are never truly silent. Breathing audible from the monitor. The particular creak of Henry settling in his crib. Sophie's updated crayon drawing was back on the refrigerator. She'd added her friend in the corner carefully, with the same pride she'd had at 3. She'd also, I noticed, drawn arrows between everyone so you could see who belonged together. The tears came without warning, not a collapse. A quiet overflow that I let happen, alone at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Friday. I cried because I had been protecting my parents from this conversation for 3 years. Filing the signs away. Accepting the small explanations. Telling myself the children were too young, the distance was too far, the pattern wasn't intentional, and therefore didn't count. But my children were not too young. Sophie was 7 and asking why her birthday wasn't at Grandma and Grandpa's house. She hadn't asked it accusingly. She'd asked the way children ask things, with genuine curiosity, trusting that the answer would be reasonable, trusting the people around her to have a reasonable answer. I had said, "It'll happen, sweetheart." I had to make that true. Not by demanding anything, not by threatening anything, by showing the people I loved the shape of what they'd been doing so they could decide whether they meant it. I wiped my face, checked the document one more time, 4 columns, clean, checked the folder of screenshots, placed both in the drawer beside my chair, ready. Then I went to check on Henry. Stood in the doorway of his room in the dark for a moment, listening to him breathe. Then Sophie's room. She was spread sideways across the bed, the way she always slept. Arms wide, making room for everyone. If someone you loved has ever tried to build something that included you, something that cost them effort and care, and you only understood what it meant later, tell me in the comments. And now let me tell you what happened at my kitchen table on a Saturday morning. Saturday morning, 10:47. My parents' car in the driveway. My mother with a coffee cake. She always brought something. My father behind her, in the flannel shirt he wore on weekends, the one that made him look like himself rather than like someone who managed a plant for 30 years. Sophie ran to the door when she heard the car. Henry followed, less certain of his footing on the stairs, but committed. My mother hugged them both. My father crouched to Henry's level and asked him something about tractors that made Henry's face change completely. This is what I mean when I say they are good people. They love my children. What they had not done was examine what love requires in practice, what habits it demands, what deliberateness it takes to translate feeling into action consistently across 2 families rather than one. I gave them coffee. I gave Sophie and Henry something in the other room. I said, "Can you 2 play for a while? Grandma and Grandpa and I need to talk." Sophie said, "Okay, Mama." She took Henry by the hand and went. We sat at the kitchen table. Coffee cake between us. The crayon drawing visible on the refrigerator from where my mother sat. I said, "I want to show you something, and I want you to let me finish before we talk about it." My mother looked at my father. My father looked at me. He said, "All right." I placed the printed document on the table. I said, "This is a list of family events from the past 3 years. 4 columns. Event. When Laura was notified. When I was notified. The gap between those 2 dates." My mother leaned forward. I said, "Please read all the way down." She read. My father read over her shoulder. The table was quiet. The coffee cake sat between us untouched. When she reached the bottom, my mother looked up. I placed my phone on the table. Opened the folder. The 3 photographs. Family celebrations. Laura's family present. My family absent, or invited last minute, or not invited at all. I said, These are the photographs from the events where Sophie and Henry weren't present. This one is Emma's birthday. This one is Christmas. This one is the Thursday dinner I was in the chat for but wasn't invited to. My father's hand moved slightly on the table, not reaching for anything, just moving. I said, "I'm not showing you this to accuse you of not loving my children. I know you love them. I'm showing you this because I don't think you've seen the shape of it until now." My mother said, "Dana?" I said, "I need to finish." She stopped. I said, "Sophie asked me last month why her birthday wasn't at Grandma and Grandpa's house. She wasn't angry. She was asking. The way children ask things when they trust the people around them to have a reasonable answer. I told her it would happen. I looked at my mother. I said, I need that to be true." The kitchen was very quiet. My father picked up the document. Read it again, top to bottom, with the attention of a man who coached Little League for 20 years and knows what a record looks like when it means something. Then he set it down. He said, "I didn't know we were doing this." I said, "I know." He said, "Patricia, did you know?" My mother had her hand over her mouth. She shook her head. Then she said, "I knew I talked to Laura first sometimes because of Mark's schedule. I didn't know how often. I didn't see it like this." I said, "I know you didn't see it. That's why I made it visible." She reached for the document. She looked at the Christmas column. Laura, 8 weeks. Dana, 3 weeks. She said, "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry." I said, "I know you are." I said, "What I need isn't sorry. What I need is for this to change. Specifically and demonstrably. Not because I'm keeping score, but because my children are keeping track in their own way, the way children do, even when they don't know they're doing it." My father nodded. One small nod, the kind that means something. The consequences came slowly. That's different from the other stories where things collapse publicly in one moment. This one was quieter. And in some ways harder. My mother called Laura that same afternoon. I know because Laura called me that evening. She said, "Mom called me. She told me what you showed them." I said, "Okay." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dana, I didn't know they were telling me things first. I thought it was just because I lived closer. I thought everyone was getting the same information at slightly different times." I said, "I believe you." She said, "I'm sorry too." I said, "Laura, you don't need to apologize. You didn't engineer this. You were just the one who was nearby." She said, "But I could have asked. I could have said, 'Is Dana coming? Does she know?'" I said, "Yes, you could have." That sat between us for a moment. She said, "Can we fix this?" I said, "I think so. But it requires your parents to change a specific habit. Every time they tell you about something, they need to tell me at the same time. Same message, same day, same notice." She said, "I'll say that to them too." I said, "Thank you." That was the most honest conversation my sister and I had ever had. Not dramatic, not tearful, just honest. The spring gathering that my mother had called about was rescheduled to give me equal notice. She sent me the date the same morning she confirmed it with Laura. She texted me first, and then texted Laura. She told me later, just to make sure. That detail, that she texted me first, was small. I noticed it. My father called me 2 weeks after the conversation. He said he wanted to do something specific. He asked me to send him Sophie's birthday. Said he wanted to plan something. I sent him the date. He said, "We'll do something at the house. Proper." I said, "She would love that." He said, "What does she like right now?" I told him. He took notes. I could hear him writing. That detail too. Emma's mother, my sister, came over with her kids on a Tuesday, unannounced, just to play. Emma and Sophie in the garden. Jake and Henry in a different language entirely, the one that belongs to big kids and small kids who have decided to get along. Laura sat in my kitchen and drank coffee. She said, "I should have been doing this all along." I said, "We both should have." We had been waiting, I think, for our parents to organize us into a relationship, and they had imperfectly, in ways that favored the family they saw more easily. What we hadn't done was build the relationship ourselves, in parallel, independently of whether my parents arranged it. That was on us. We started arranging it. Sophie's birthday is in March. My parents hosted. Not a big party. 15 children is a big party, and we've already had that kind of birthday at home. This was family. The good tablecloth. My mother's homemade cake, the same one she makes for every birthday. A yellow cake with cream cheese frosting. My father had found out Sophie's current interest was horses, and there were paper horses cut out and hanging on string from the dining room chandelier. Sophie walked in and stopped in the doorway. She looked at the horses. She looked at the tablecloth. She looked at her grandparents. Then she walked directly to my father and hugged him around the middle without saying anything, the way 7-year-olds hug when they have used up their words. He bent down and hugged her back. I stood in the doorway and watched that. I had been waiting for the right words for 3 years. I had been preparing documents and building evidence and planning conversations. All of it necessary. All of it real. But this, my daughter's arms around my father's waist, the horses turning slowly on their strings in the warm air of the dining room, this was what it had been for. Not the document. Not the photographs. Not the conversation. This. My mother found me in the hallway afterward. She said, "I've been thinking about something. When your grandmother was alive, she kept a calendar. You know how she had the big paper calendar on her kitchen wall?" I said, "The one with everyone's birthdays marked?" She said, "She marked them on the day they were born, in red pen, every year. Never missed one." I said, "I remember." She said, "I thought that was just a Grandma Edna thing. Something old-fashioned. I didn't understand why she made such a production of it." She said, "I'm starting to understand." I said, "She knew." My mother was quiet. She said, "She talked to me once when you were small." She said, "Patricia, make sure you look over your shoulder. People forget to check." I said, she said the same thing to me. We stood in the hallway and understood that the woman who had been gone 5 years had known exactly what she was telling us. It's April now. The spring gathering my parents planned happened last weekend. 40 minutes to my parents' house. Both families, all 4 children. The garden's starting to come in, the kind of pale green that only happens in April when the light is just beginning to stay longer. Emma and Sophie ran ahead of the adults into the backyard. Jake and Henry followed at the dignified pace of a 10-year-old accompanying a 4-year-old who wants to run, but can't quite keep up. My father watched them from the back step. He said, "I didn't see it. I was standing beside him." I said, "I know." He said, "I don't think that's an excuse." I said, "No, but it's true." He said, "I want to make sure Sophie and Henry know they belong here. The same way Emma and Jake know." I said, "Then you'll make sure. That's all this requires." He nodded. He is not an expressive man. He said what he needed to say, and then he went to find Henry and show him something in the garden, a bird's nest in the low branches of the apple tree, which Henry received as the most significant piece of information he had been given in his 4 years. I stood on the step alone for a moment. I thought about the photograph that had started everything. Emma's birthday, the good tablecloth, everyone together, my children absent. One photograph. And the spreadsheet I'd made, 4 columns, events and dates and gaps. Neither of those things fixed anything by themselves. The document was necessary. It made the shape visible in a way that feeling alone couldn't. But the shape had to be seen by people who were willing to look. My parents, when they looked, had been willing. That's the part that mattered, not the confrontation. The willingness on both sides to look at what was actually there. I've been thinking about what my grandmother Edna understood. She kept a calendar with birthdays marked in red pen because she knew that love, for all its feeling, requires maintenance. Requires the kind of deliberate attention that doesn't happen automatically, that you have to build into your habits, your calendar, your phone reminders, the paper you keep on the wall. She marked them every year. Never missed one. Not because she had to, because she understood that showing up consistently is the thing that makes love legible to the people receiving it. And children receive love through the question, was I expected? Was there room for me? Did someone mark this day in red because they knew it was mine? Sophie got her birthday at Grandma and Grandpa's house, with paper horses and cream cheese frosting and my father's handwriting on the back of the invitation that had been sent 3 weeks in advance. She is currently drawing a thank you card. Crayons. Everyone in it. She's added horses. She's run out of space on the paper and asked me for a bigger piece. There are a lot of people in our family, apparently. I gave her a bigger piece. That's enough. That's more than enough. It's a start. If your children have ever asked you a question that made you realize something needed to change, I want to hear about it. And if you've ever had to make a pattern visible to someone who genuinely couldn't see it, type visible in the comments. Tell me what it cost and whether it was worth it. Subscribe and hit the bell. A new story every day. Check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you tomorrow.